History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes with a terrifying precision. And in 2026, the global economy has begun a rhythmic descent into a darkness we thought we had left behind a century ago. In 1930, two men named Smoot and Hawley signed a bill that ignited a global trade war, turning a manageable recession into the decade-long agony of the Great Depression. Today, as we stand in the shadow of a new isolationism, the era of globalism is officially being buried. We are no longer living in a world of seamless borders and optimized logistics, but in a fractured reality defined by 20-foot-high digital walls and a heavy tax on every heartbeat of international commerce. As the United States pushes its average tariff rates to a staggering 14%, levels not seen since the collapse of the 1930s, the delicate web of global supply chains is not just stretching, it is snapping under the weight of economic nationalism. Imagine waking up to find that your morning routine has become a geopolitical battlefield. That Colombian coffee in your mug is now 30% more expensive due to a maritime dispute, and your smartphone, once a miracle of global cooperation, has been reclassified as a restricted technological asset. This isn't just a shift in trade policy, it is the literal fragmentation of the human collective into isolated, hostile blocks, where the products we once shared have been transformed into political bullets fired across a digital iron curtain. In this documentary, we are pulling back the curtain on the great fragmentation of 2026, exploring how the world stopped buying from its neighbors and started building fortresses, and why the middle class is about to pay the ultimate price for a global game of chicken. Take a long, hard look at the smartphone in your hand. It is not merely a piece of consumer electronics, but a fragile, high-tech peace treaty signed by 30 different nations that is now being shredded in real time. This device is the crowning achievement of the era we just lost, where a brain designed in California could seamlessly communicate with memory forged in Seoul, eyes polished in Tokyo, and a lithium heart refined in the industrial hubs of China. But in 2026, as the customs wall rises to a staggering 14%, that masterpiece of global cooperation has been transformed into a geopolitical hostage. When a single semiconductor crossing the Pacific is suddenly hit with a levy in Taiwan, a retaliatory surcharge in the Philippines, and a massive federal tariff in Long Beach, the result isn't just a $200 price hike for the frustrated consumer. It is the literal disintegration of the most complex supply chain in human history. We are witnessing a systemic seizing of the engine as tech giants are forced into an impossible ultimatum. Either abandon the lucrative American market or abandon the global efficiency that made them the most valuable companies on Earth. The global phone is becoming a relic of a bygone golden age, replaced by the block phone, a device whose features, price, and very existence depend entirely on which side of the trade fortifications you happen to live. This fragmentation is creating a digital caste system where the flow of information is no longer determined by the speed of light, but by the thickness of a tariff wall, signaling the end of the democratic internet and the beginning of a world where your hardware is your destiny. The war of 2026 isn't just being fought in the sterile clean rooms of Silicon Valley. It has invaded your kitchen counter, your morning commute, and your very ability to sustain a middle-class life. Consider the humble coffee machine, once a mundane symbol of affordable global trade, now transformed into a political bullet fired by competing economic empires. In this new landscape, a simple appliance is no longer just a collection of parts, but a casualty of a subsidy war where the steel frame is caught in a deadlock between the European Union and the BRICS Plus nations, while the heating elements are indefinitely stalled in a port in Rotterdam due to reciprocal retaliatory duties. What used to be a $50 accessible convenience is now a luxury item, not because the technology improved, but because the customs wall has added a layer of invisible friction to every bolt, wire, and plastic casing. As the 14% tariff threshold ripples through the global economy, it creates a compounding tax effect, a nightmare scenario where taxes on raw materials, taxes on intermediate components, and taxes on final shipping stack upon one another like a crushing weight. This is the ghost of 1930 manifesting in the 21st century, A world where the average citizen pays the ultimate price for a high-stakes game of chicken played by superpowers. When global trade fragments, the first casualty isn't the billionaire CEO in a glass tower. It is the purchasing power of the ordinary person who suddenly finds that the basic comforts of a connected world have been priced out of their reach, turning the American dream into a fortress that only the elite can afford to enter. We are witnessing the official finalization of the Great Divorce, a tectonic shift where the world is being violently torn into two irreconcilable economic ecosystems: the US-led Western Bloc and the rapidly consolidating BRICS Plus alliance. For decades, the Comerica model, the symbiotic marriage between American consumption and Chinese production, was the stabilizer of the global order. But in 2026, that marriage has ended in a scorched earth legal battle over the very future of trade. As the 14% tariff wall rises in the West, the East is responding by constructing its own mirrors of exclusion, creating a parallel world where digital payments, satellite GPS, and energy grids no longer speak the same language. This isn't just a disagreement over the price of steel. It is a total systemic decoupling where a factory in Vietnam must now choose a side, knowing that to sell to Chicago means being banned from Shanghai. The result is a grotesque inefficiency that economists once thought impossible. The global village is being replaced by two fortified camps, each racing to secure its own minerals, its own data silos, and its own sphere of influence. This fragmentation means that the era of just-in-time logistics is dead, replaced by the paranoid reality of just-in-case stockpiling, where nations hoard resources like gold in a medieval siege. As the West attempts to reshore its industry behind protective barriers, the BRICS Plus nations are finalizing a non-dollar financial system that bypasses the traditional gatekeepers of Wall Street entirely. We are no longer living in one world with many markets. We are living in two separate realities, and the bridge between them has been burned to the ground by the very tariffs meant to protect them. In the year 2026, the global trade war has evolved into its most dangerous phase, the weaponization of the reserve currency. For decades, the US dollar was the undisputed king, the silent glue that held the global markets together. But as the 14% tariff wall rises, Washington has increasingly used the dollar as a tool of geopolitical discipline, turning the world's financial plumbing into a system of rewards and punishments. This aggressive strategy has triggered a paradox of overuse, where nations once loyal to the dollar now view their holdings as potential hostages rather than safe assets. In response, the BRICS Plus alliance has accelerated the launch of BRICS Pay and gold-backed settlement mechanisms, creating a parallel financial universe designed to bypass the SWIFT network and the reach of American sanctions entirely. Gold prices have shattered all-time records, surging toward $4,600 per ounce, as central banks from Berlin to Beijing desperately scramble to repatriate their bullion and diversify their reserves away from a currency they no longer perceive as neutral. The exorbitant privilege of the greenback is being challenged not by a single rival currency, but by a thousands-year-old distrust, forcing the world into a chaotic de-dollarization cycle that threatens to drain global liquidity and send borrowing costs into the stratosphere. We are witnessing the end of the monetary Pax Americana, where the dollar is no longer a bridge of commerce, but a wall of exclusion, pushing the global financial system toward a multipolar abyss where trust is the scarcest commodity of all. The ghost of the 1930s is most visible not in the halls of power, but in the silent, rusted cranes of the world's most advanced ports, where the just-in-time manufacturing model, the holy grail of modern capitalism, has officially breathed its last breath. For 40 years, the global economy operated on the razor-thin margin of efficiency, where a car part made in Germany arrived in Mexico exactly 6 hours before it was needed on the assembly line. However, in 2026, the 14% tariff wall and the resulting retaliatory paperwork have turned these precision logistics into a chaotic, just-in-case nightmare. Ports like Long Beach, Rotterdam, and Singapore have become massive parking lots for stranded containers, as customs officials struggle to navigate a labyrinth of new regulations, origin verification certificates, and fluctuating duty rates that change by the hour. This systemic friction has triggered a bullwhip effect across the planet, where a minor delay in a microchip factory in Vietnam causes a 3-month shutdown of a medical equipment plant in Ohio, sending shockwaves of scarcity through every hospital and pharmacy. Companies are now forced to abandon the pursuit of low costs and instead build massive, expensive stockpiles of raw materials, effectively tying up billions of dollars in dead inventory just to ensure their survival. This is the logistics tax, an invisible, crushing cost that is being added to every gallon of milk and every gallon of fuel as the world trades the elegance of a global supply chain for the expensive, redundant, and sluggish reality of national self-sufficiency. As the year 2026 unfolds, the most dangerous consequence of the customs wall is not measured in GDP percentages or trade deficits, but in the rising tide of domestic unrest that is tearing through the social fabric of the world's major economies. In the United States, the average household is now grappling with an estimated $1,300 annual tariff tax, a hidden levy that has effectively neutralized the benefits of recent tax cuts and sent the cost of basic necessities, from clothing to groceries, into a volatile upward spiral. This is the moment where economic nationalism loses its luster, as the promised return of factory jobs is overshadowed by the immediate reality of stagflation. Public frustration is boiling over into large-scale protests against the soaring cost of living. Across Europe and Asia, the story is the same. According to the 2026 Global Risks Report, nearly 60% of the population now predicts significant public unrest as the great fragmentation squeezes real wages and erodes the purchasing power of the middle class. We are witnessing the breakdown of the 20th century social contract, where the guarantee of a better life through global cooperation has been replaced by a zero-sum game that leaves the most vulnerable citizens to choose between heating their homes or feeding their families. The geopolitical game of chicken played by billionaires and world leaders has finally hit the kitchen table, turning economic anxiety into a potent political weapon that threatens to topple governments and redefine the meaning of stability in an age of isolation. As we stand at the threshold of 2027, the smoke from the 2026 tariff wars has cleared enough for us to see the silhouette of a new world, one that would be unrecognizable to the architects of the 21st century. The era of the unipolar world, governed by a single set of rules and a single reserve currency, has officially vanished into the history books, replaced by a jagged, multipolar reality where geography is once again destiny. We have learned the hard way that when the flow of goods stops, the flow of ideas and empathy often follows, leaving a void filled by suspicion and fortified borders. Yet, even in this era of fragmentation, a new realignment is beginning to take shape. Forward-thinking nations are no longer trying to rebuild the broken bridges of the past, but are instead engineering a new trade order based on resilient regional hubs and transparent, digital-first logistics. The question for the next decade is not whether we can return to the hyper-globalism of the 90s, that door is closed, but whether we can manage our differences without sliding into the total economic collapse that defined the 1930s. The choice remains ours. Will we continue to sharpen our tariffs into weapons of mass economic destruction? Or will we find a way to coexist in a world where the customs wall is not a fortress, but a gateway to a more balanced and localized prosperity? As the dust settles on the great fragmentation, one truth remains. In a trade war, the only true victors are those who understand that in a connected world, isolation is not a strategy, it is a slow-motion suicide.